One of the best things about buying plants from the people who grow them is that you can benefit from their expert planting knowledge and tips. So I've asked 7 growers from the Plant Fairs Roadshow to tell me what plants would be the best ones for me to plant in my border in spring that will keep on flowering for a good period of time, and also to give us some spring planting tips. It's Alexandra here from the Middle-Sized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and the Plant Fairs Roadshow is a collective of independent plant nurseries that organise plant fairs in beautiful gardens around the southeast. So I'll put the link to that in the description below. This time I caught up with Plant Fairs Roadshow at Ramster Hall Gardens in Surrey, which has 25 acres of beautiful gardens. It's known for its spring colour, its rhododendrons and its azaleas, and it's got a fab cafe.
My name's Steve Edney, and me and Louise Dow, my partner, run the No Name Nursery. And we specialise in exotics and drought-tolerant perennials.
And do you have a particular tip for planting, if you're planting in spring, towards the end of spring? Is there any advice you have for people, particularly as you're quite dry where you are, aren't you? What advice would you have for people who are planting into quite dry soils?
Well, my biggest piece of advice, actually, other than planting into a slight bowl so that water runs into the crown, because if you plant on a mound, you tend to get water running away from the crown of a plant and away from its roots, and therefore plants get even drier. But actually, my biggest piece of advice at the moment is, with the change to an awful lot of peat-free composts, something we're noticing, I mean, it's a good thing, we're all making the right choices, but what we have noticed is that the peat-free composts are better when you shake off the compost and mix it with the soil. So you're almost planting a plant as if it's bare roots, because we found that some of the peat-free composts will basically sort of evaporate. They rot down really fast, leaving hollows around the roots when you've planted them. So if you can, it actually does the plant a huge favour by getting it home, tipping it out of the pot, just gently teasing out the roots, mixing it in with the soil so that the plant has got the best possible start.
That's brilliant, actually, really interesting. Now, you've brought along 2 plants to recommend for planting it to fill a gap at this time of year.
Oh, yeah, spring, yes.
Tell me, which?
Well, so we have a plant called Lamium orvala. And so where we are in East Kent, it's very hot, it's very dry. We have high light levels, low rainfall. And for spring, the bumblebees adore Lamium orvala. This is a woodlander, so it prefers part shade. Can even tolerate quite deep shade, but sometimes if it's too deep, the shade, it can sulk and not flower. But you still get this dead nettle effect, so it won't sting you, even though it looks like it's a stinger nettle. But it does have these wonderfully large purple flowers with white venation on their tongue that sticks out. And that's like a landing pad for bumblebees. So it's very large, and the bumblebees can really forage their way in there for nectar in the spring. And the thing about Kent and East Kent particularly is we have really big colonies of bumblebees because of the light level. So we look specifically for plants that are really attractive for bumblebees, very drought tolerant, happy in shade, spring flowering. And the foliage will persist all summer, which helps to keep the weeds down and keep the interest level high in the flower bed, even when it's out of flower.
We seem to have somebody has joined us.
Hello, my friend. So the next plant I have is Geum called Pink Petticoats. And I just fell in love with Geums a few years ago when we visited the National Collection Holder, and we picked up some special plants. And this is one that I particularly love, the ruffled and sort of two-tone flowers to it. It's not very tall. Some of the Geums, the one that's become very popular, like Totally Tangerine, and for a very good reason, it's a wonderful plant. This is a little more subtle. It's better if you have one of those borders where you don't want big, brash colours. And it's only about 30 centimetres tall. The key with Geums is that they don't like to dry out. They will tolerate part shade, particularly if it's a little on the drier side. It's better to plant them in a bit of light shade. If it's a very damp, wet site, then you can grow them in full sun, no problem at all. You have to remember that Rivulari, one of the wild species of Geum, which lots of them are crossed with, grows wild in one of the wettest places on earth. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, in fact, it can be a real advantage when you're thinking about where to plant something. You have plants that like the dry, and there are plants that like the damp. And And if you've got a very wet spot where other plants just seem to rot and disappear, perhaps a Geum is right for you.
Hi, I'm Paul. I run Pelham Plants. We've got a small nursery in the Sussex Weald. We specialise in herbaceous perennials broadly.
What is your advice for planting at this time of year, which is, late spring, not quite early summer?
Yeah. Well, it's been a particularly wet spring and late winter for us. And we're on the edge of a woodland site on Wealden clay. And with all the rain and the heavy water sitting on the soil that we've had, the soil becomes very compressed. So if I'm going to do some new planting, maybe fill some gaps or create a new border, I will want to try and open up the soil a little bit. I'll add in plenty of organic matter. I probably won't dig very deeply. I don't want to bring up a lot of clay, but I'll want to try and open the surface of the soil again, get some leaf litter in, get some of my own homemade compost in, and make the soil more friable again after that winter saturation.
And you've got a plant that you recommend that we plant now in spring to fill a gap in the border and which will look good for a long time. So what is it?
Yeah, well, this is my plant for spring, really. It's in a commonly planted genus. This is Geranium maculatum spring purple. It's an American geranium. People might argue that you could have a geranium, a true hardy geranium, flowering every single day of the year. There are so many different varieties, but not many people know Geranium maculatum. It's a good ground cover geranium. It's good in shade, and it's very dry tolerant once established. There's little creeping rhizomes below the soil surface. And I love to add this in a spring border. In my own garden, I've just taken out the last of the forget-me-nots, so I don't get too many seedlings. There's now quite a few gaps in there. So I would put this in just to lift the colour a little bit. And you'll find the vibrant purple here is quite a change to a lot of the geraniums, which can be muted whites and pinks or rich purples. This is quite a bright, uplifting colour. So I would even be prepared to plant this in deep shade, under a shrub, under a tree. And it's quite an uplifting, but long-lived and tolerant plant, tolerant of potentially dry conditions, potentially heavy soils. It's one of my favourite, easy plants to garden with. But this is a spring flowering plant. So it will uplift you in the spring, give you a little bit of colour, go on until early summer. But then once your shade, and my shade is typically created by maybe the neighbour's trees or the edge of the woodland, it can get quite dry in summer. This will finish flowering but remain in leaf and create quite a dense ground cover and suppress weeds and extend its rhizome range, ready to burst into colour the following spring.
My name is Annie Godfrey and I run a nursery called Daisy Roots. We specialise in choice and unusual perennials and grasses. First one I have here is Geum Mai Tai, which is a lovely semi-double soft apricot colour with hints of peach. It enjoys life in sun or part shade on any reasonable soil that doesn't get baked dry. And that will form a nice clump. Flowers are about a foot tall, 30 centimetres tall. And if you deadhead, you can keep that going to about sort of mid-June time, I would say. So end of April through to June. And secondly, we have got Nepeta cat's pyjamas, which is worth growing just for the name alone, but is a really good deep blue Nepeta, quite a neat little mound, only to, I guess, about 6 inches tall and about a foot wide. So a neat plant which has dark stained stems and calyxes which produce these violet blue flowers.
It's very attractive. And does it need to grow in any particular kind of soil or anything?
A sunny spot, reasonably well drained for that one. Bees love it too.
The Plant Fairs Roadshow is doing an exhibit at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show this year. So can you tell me what people might see if they come to visit you?
What people can expect to see is a collaboration of nurseries coming together. There are 7 of us building 7 individual exhibits, but around a central hub where there's information about the plant fairs that we hold throughout the southeast. With 7 of us doing 7 different styles. Some of us are doing drought tolerant, some are shady, some are plants for clay, for instance. There's something for everyone, really, I think. So we've got all bases covered.
My name is Graham Blunt. I represent Plantbase Nursery and we specialise in, well, an awful lot of plants, but we're known for our exotics. Well, these 2 plants are from my forthcoming Chelsea Flower Show display. coming up in about 3-4 weeks' time. And the theme is plants for climate change. So all my plants I'm showing at the show have to survive prolonged drought, prolonged flooding, prolonged heat, and prolonged cold. And it's a very, 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 very small palette to choose from. But these two are both ideal for planting now in the spring because they're both in flower. So I'll tell you a little bit about them if you wish. The first one is a Spirea, because the Spireas are basically tough as old boots. You dig a hole, you put them in, they'll take a fair amount of shade, a fair amount of sun. They're so hardy, they'll take cold, wet, you name it. They literally are so utilitarian. They'll do the job. And they get about 6 foot tall, 4 foot wide, and that's all you need to do to them, just put them in the ground. The other one is a bit more rare. This is an Erica from South Africa. It's a water heath. It grows in some marshy areas, but again, the key thing here is with any boggy areas in continental places like Europe or Asia or America, any plants that grow around little ponds and little streams, they're used to drying out in the heat of the summer, so they can take drought. They can also take the flooding, because obviously they're growing around a small pond or a stream. Being continental, they tend to take a lot of frost, and being continental, they take a lot of heat as well. So they're ideal for that kind of thing, and that is of that ilk. It will survive about -15 to -16 below freezing. It'll grow in water. I have actually grown these underwater in a bath, not my own bath, of course, and my wife would be a bit upset about that, but in a bath for 12 months to prove they'll take the flooding. And they'll take the droughts, they'll take, as I said, -15, -16, and they'll take loads of heat because they're from South Africa. But both these plants will be in my shelves and display.
My name's Miles Hayward, and I'm from Miles Japanese Maples, and I specialise in Japanese maples, or Acer palmatum. But I also grow a few other maples from seed as well.
And of course, the interesting thing about you here with a maple at the moment is that actually you wouldn't advise planting a maple in the spring, would you? So what would you advise if somebody falls in love with one of your wonderful maples? What would you advise them to do?
Okay, so I would always say to people, the best time, and as has always been the way traditionally, is to do your planting of trees and shrubs in the autumn months. If you tend to plant them this time of year, the foliage tends to get spoiled slightly. And the way our weather's going, although it's been wet the last few days, if we do happen to get another hot, dry summer, often trees, they will sort of struggle to get settled in. So if you can look after them in a container throughout the growing season, as long as you keep it well watered, plant in the autumn, often they get much better established over the autumn and early winter, and then they do much better the following season.
And you were saying that you'd advise keeping it in the same container, not taking it out of that container and putting it into a bigger one, but just keep it in that container over the summer. Maybe pop that into something that looks more ornamental and it'll be as happy as anything.
Yes. So I grow the trees in these air pots, and the air pots are designed to stop root spiralling, which can be a big problem for trees. You can have girdling, which means that when you do plant them, they never establish properly in the ground. So whereas the roots in a traditional container would hit the wall of the pot and then carry on round in a circular motion, these are designed to guide it out towards the holes, but the tip of the root is then pruned by the air, so the root can't survive in the air. It's the equivalent of it being pruned, which then means the rest of the root in the soil inside branches, and that happens again and again and again, and you end up with a really nice fibrous root system. I would suggest that you could grow it in this container, maybe stand it inside a nice glazed pot or a terracotta pot. That then helps shade the air pot, so it keeps it a bit cooler, keeps it more humid, and also stops it from blowing over as well if we happen to get more terrible winds.
So if you'd bought a tree in a pot that isn't an air pot, would it start girdling over the first summer? What would you do?
It very much depends. So always check when you're buying any tree how long it's been in that pot. I would never advise buying a really pot-bound tree. It doesn't matter how much sort of root teasing you can do. Often, but there's some trees in particular like magnolia and eucalyptus, if they get very pot-bound, they never really establish in the garden, and so it's a bit of a false economy. So always, if a tree's been potted a year or two in a pot, that's fine. But if it looks like the pot is too small for the tree, it may be best not to go ahead.
So my name's Dan Cooper from Dan Cooper Garden, and I specialise in really good gardening tools and gardening accessories and things that you can't find in the garden centre. So I think my trick for planting in spring is not to overdo it, because everything is just coming up through the ground and it's very easy to assume that you've got lots and lots of gaps to fill, but plants just increase in volume so much in the spring What I tend to do is sort of let them get on with it and then grow some annuals to put in the gaps if I get them a bit later on. But it's a danger if you end up planting too many plants close together because you think you've got gaps in spraying.
So you've brought something along today. We're all looking for substitutes for plastic pots. So tell me what you've got here.
Well, these are WoolPots. They're made from British wool that otherwise would go to waste. And these have just won Which's Most Sustainable Pot Award. And so they're a wool pot. They're a single-use pot. So they're knitted like this, and you just stretch them over a pot like this. You fill them with compost or put your cuttings in or put your seeds in, and then you can lift the whole lot out. And then the plant will grow in that. It'll grow with its roots towards the air holes, and then it air prunes, so the roots don't come through. And then this one's been in here about 3 or 4 months, and this one's now ready to go in the ground. You can see it's beginning to break down. And wool is an amazing source of nitrogen. So for any nitrogen-loving plants, leafy vegetables, for example, like cabbages, it's a really good source of food for them when they go in the ground. And the woolly rim will stop the slugs and snails going over as well. So I think they're brilliant.
Absolutely. And they would you stick them straight in there like that. The wool slowly rots away, plant grows.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Exactly. No waste, and it fertilises the soil as it goes.
Yeah, my name is Robert Hardy. I'm from Hardy's Cottage Garden Plants at Freefolk, Whitchurch in Hampshire. We're on Watership Down. We grow about 1,500 varieties of perennials, peat-free, and we're now doing propagation peat-free as well.
Brilliant. And you brought a special plant today. It's actually very beautiful. Tell us about it.
This is very special to me. It was discovered by my grandfather 104 years ago in 1920. And he found it at Tissington Hall in Derbyshire. It's halfway between Ashbourne and Derby, Ashbourne and Buxton. And he was a gardener there. He'd seen the normal Veronica gentianoides, which is the pale blue. And then he saw this one growing. It flowered about 10 days later. And it's white with a blue veining on it. And so he took some out of the garden, put it in his own garden, mentioned it to my sister, who's a very good gardener as well up in Derbyshire. And then she passed it on to us when we first started the nursery in the early 90s. And she explained to us where it came from. So we named it after the village, Tissington White.
Right. And so tell me why it's such a good plant to plant in your border now to fill a gap.
Right, it flowers this time of year, so you're normally talking end of April through May into early June. It is an edge of woodland plant, so it prefers morning sun or afternoon sun, so it gets a little bit of shade. With edge of woodland, it likes a reasonably humus soil. It'll flower through till June, late June, and once it's finished flowering, cut the flower stems off, it'll produce a nice green mat which expands. It sort of doubles its size each year, and then you can start dividing it quite happily.
And once you've bought your plants, of course, then you need to plant them in the border. So for some wonderful border planting and planning tips, don't miss this video interview with Tom Brown, head gardener of West Dean, in how to create a stunning perennial border. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.